Coming up on Maine Challenge, Maine's Commissioner of Education. Hello and welcome to Maine Challenge, a presentation of Lincoln County Indivisible and Lincoln County TV. Our guest today is Commissioner of Education for the state of Maine, Pender Makin. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Chuck.
Would you be kind enough to give us a little bit of your background? What led you on this journey that puts you here at the Department of Education at the top and the most challenging time? I'm sure all of your predecessor commissioners would agree that this is the time that tries people's souls. What brought you here?
Well, I'll tell you, I spent my entire career in education. I started as an ed tech, and I was then a teacher of behaviorally challenging students for a long period of time in Westbrook. Then I became a principal of a regional program for extremely at-risk youth. And after that, I became assistant superintendent in Brunswick. So I've had a lot of different experiences. I've done everything from driving a van full of unruly children to, I've plunged the toilets in schools and, prepared the meals and made policy. And I got to say that I believe that education, public education in particular, is absolutely foundational and critical to any hope of a future thriving democracy. And I guess I would go to the mat every single day to do what I can to hold it up and protect it and make it as great as it can possibly be. That's how I got here. And then came COVID-19, unanticipated challenge of all time. I don't think public education has faced a bigger challenge than this.
I'm sure not, and that's, I guess, a good starting place for our talk today. I know the governor has been doing a good job. The CDC has been doing a good job. I'm very lucky that I live in the state of Maine. Do you think Maine is ready to send the kids back to school?
Well, yeah, I think I certainly have great faith in our DHHS team, the CDC team, Dr. Shah, and the community group of scientists, researchers, and former health officials that create those checklists for safety. And I am not myself a medical or health professional. So I am entrusting our readiness in terms of being a safe and healthy return to those. We've identified 6 critical pieces that have to be in place in order to assure safety and a healthy return for everybody. I do feel that we're ready in how schools have had capacity, opportunities and guidance and communication, and we're there for them. As a department, we are 100% in it together with them. We work every single day with leaders of schools and districts and with educators and with families and even our student cabinet. So we've involved everybody in the conversations to develop our framework. So are we ready? We are readier, I would say, than any other state in the nation in terms of being a cohesive, caring, ready to commit school department and school system across the state.
I think I'm safe saying that nobody wants things to go back to normal more than I do, but I have a great deal of trepidation about sending the kids back to school, and I worry even more than for the kids. I worry about the teachers and the staff, because I know, it seems like it's just an impossible environment to really and truly protect people. We watched on the media, on the news, when the Chamber of Commerce in Florida said, we got to get people back to the beaches. And then the footage of the next weekend was beaches mobbed with people. And then 2 weeks later, we have headlines saying the ICUs are choked. My feeling is we need really widespread testing and contact tracing would sure be nice, and a vaccine we hope is coming. I just don't feel like we're ready. That's my opinion, but I'd like to hear what the school departments and the Department of Education uh, feel about the risk that obviously we're about to step into.
Right. Well, everything that you have expressed right there is extremely understandable. And I think all of us are on a continuum where that is part of how we feel on any given day. So I need to honor and respect the fact that this is an unknowable environment. And I don't take it lightly that we're asking our educators to step into these roles, into the classroom with groups of students in a pandemic, even though our state has proven to be, I think, safer than every place else. Maybe we go back and forth with Vermont thus far. Oh, sorry. I need to move around to get the light. Sorry. Yeah, so I feel like your fears are fully understandable. They're to be nervous. That's a well-founded feeling that one might have. Of course, I'm also nervous. I don't take any of it lightly. My husband is a teacher. He'll be going back into the classrooms, and I'm seriously considering moving an office around into schools so that I wouldn't be asking people to do something I wouldn't be willing to also do myself. That said, when we weigh the well-being, if we really look in a laser-like focus for a moment about why we exist as a public school system, we're there to help these students. And the risk to students who haven't been in a classroom setting since last March, particularly those most disadvantaged students with the least enriched environments with possibly substandard supervision during their days and substandard nutritional needs and eyes on to be sure that they are okay and thriving. Those kids are in my mind every single day. Do I want to ask educators to put themselves out there like frontline medical workers? Absolutely not. Which is why we've asked the checklist group and the CDC to really identify and clarify for us what conditions will make it so that we can say that the teachers and staff members are going to be safe, and students, of course, are going to be safe going back into the school buildings. And we feel that they've done a very comprehensive, and in fact, Maine is far more stringent than many of the states, as you know, who are in red hot community transmission. We're using more higher standards of safety, and I'm very hopeful that these measures are going to be keeping everybody safe. And in the event that things should change and that we start to see community transmission creeping into our state, I think we're also prepared with remote and hybrid learning plans across the board for schools to be able to.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works? I mean, obviously, we're here on a remote learning environment right now. But how does that work for classrooms full of children and teachers? They weren't really trained on all this. Are we going to be able to hit the ground running on hybrid learning and electronic distance learning?
I think we're hopefully going to be ready to hit the ground running. During those first 3 months of shutdown in March, people were not ready. It was emergency learning. We can't say that that was what we would put out as our variety of remote learning. It was, how do we get through this completely unanticipated emergency together? And during that time, the Department of Education team, whose website, for any viewers who would be interested to get some really nice ideas and support and maybe some reassurance, our website has been actually extolled for its thorough and helpful ability to support teachers. But we were providing daily office hours for educators and for parents, everything from social, emotional, and mental health for parents at home with kids or for educators trying to work with students remotely, to online learning and teaching 101 and a number of other like free and open source and available resources. Throughout the late spring and the summer, we've been very busy with teachers from across the state developing an online learning system that is basically Maine teachers teaching Maine curriculum to Maine students. And we are going to have, by the 8th of September is our target date, we will have available free open source online, somewhat like Coursera, if you're familiar with that, with the courses that are offered online. Well, these courses will be taught by Maine teachers, and they are based on Maine curriculum, and it will cover grades K through 12, every one of the content areas. And so that would be something that educators could tap into and co-teach with. So it's a system that we're putting together. We'll only have the first quarter's worth ready by the 8th of September. So this is like a real-time exercise. And then by the end of the first quarter, we'll have the second quarter in place. And we put out an all call to educators who'd be interested in this really innovative approach. And we have had, I believe, 400 respondents offering to provide their educational services to the kids.
What about the at the beginning of July and into August, Maine always has an influx of people from out of state who come here to enjoy our beautiful state. Have any of your or the CDC projections that you've had access to account for? Because I know we're so lucky and fortunate, and we've done a great job keeping our numbers down compared to national numbers. But are we ready? And what's the impact that the tourists coming in to the state, and some of them bringing the virus with them, how does that get managed at the beginning of September?
Right. Well, it's interesting because, and again, these would be great questions for the epidemiologists and so forth. However, I have paid close attention. And we heard back in May that after Mother's Day, for example, early May, we could look 2 to 3 weeks out and see if we get a bump. And then came early June, and it was before that there was Memorial Day. That was another one. They were saying, well, Memorial Day, the impact of that, we're going to see it around Father's Day. And around Father's Day, we didn't see the impact. Then there's 4th of July, and we thought 2 to 3 weeks out from that, we were certainly, because you've seen, the license plates, people are in our state and enjoying it. So far, and I think people are really watching those key times for when there's an influx. So I think we're all keeping our fingers on the pulse of that. We're watching very carefully for a number of different signs. I know that the CDC and DHHS are looking at measures, not just the number of cases, but also what's the nature. Is it a isolated outbreak in a specific facility? Is it community transmission? And what are our percentage positive rates? And in many states, they're saying if they could just get down to 5% positive, they wouldn't have to do face masks or distancing in their schools. New York says that if they hit 3%, they're going to start to close back down. In Maine, we haven't gone over 1% in quite a while. I mean, we're 0 point something percent at this point. So we seem to still, and I don't take that lightly. I don't mean to be cavalier. We're being extraordinarily careful, but even at our extraordinarily low rate of positivity, we are implementing more stringent safeguards than many of the states.
Is the department and the districts, are they set up to turn on a dime if they need to? I mean, if there's an all of a sudden unanticipated rush of cases, can you adapt fast and quick? Are you prepared for that possibility?
Every school district in the state is preparing a trifold plan, and most of them have already completed those plans and had them passed by their school boards and approved. All of those plans include everybody in, like a wholesale, all students 5 days a week. They also include a hybrid model that would have some students in and some students not in at the same time in order to accommodate the distancing that's necessary. And they also have a remote learning for 100% remote. And they've also been developing kind of shoulder plans for how will those transitions play out, exactly what you're saying. We've already had the worst case situation. We had to just, like a light switch, everybody shut down at once. I think it'll be a very dire situation if we say the entire state is shut down like that again. That again could happen, of course, but we're thinking it's more likely that we'll see a regional flare-up and be able to, hopefully in a nimble and less disruptive way, ease back, increase the safeguards, pull students, into remote learning in certain areas, and be more thoughtful and prepared as we do that.
Does a district superintendent have the authority and the ability to just simply make a radical move like that, or does he need to run it through the Board of Education or through the Commissioner's office or whatever?
No, actually, superintendents are the only people in statute who have the power to say the schools are closed. They do it all the time for snowstorms, for example, and it's a lonely and heavy-weighted job for those folks. I've actually had that role, and it's a hard one. So they do have the capacity and the authority to close down their schools if they need to.
Do you see the need for a lot more funding than is currently available for assisting districts and assisting schools in meeting the new goals that were not anticipated when this budget was created?
Absolutely. And to that effect, I put together a budget that assumed through the December 30th of this coming December, it will probably cost an additional $328 million to operate Maine schools statewide. I presented that to the Appropriations Committee about a month ago. The numbers, of course, are extrapolated for unknowable circumstances, but they are all based on actual costs. And so one example is, we believe we could be looking at a critical staffing shortage due to the fact that there are many educators who are older or who are in a high-risk health category who will be unable to return this fall. And schools might be looking at upwards of 20% staff absences. That's a real concern. That is a critical issue, because even if the money existed to cover the cost of paying people who are out on leave and also paying a substitute, if the money were there, the substitutes are not there yet. And we are working really hard to make that happen. But back to the funding, we took the average salary paid to a substitute in a day, and we extrapolated that for 20% through the end of December. That amount alone, just in additional staffing to cover staff absences, would be $151 million.
Wow.
What the governor's office has done is they have approved the use of the coronavirus relief funding for schools.
Well, that's federal.
Yeah, that's the federal CRF funding, exactly. And they approved our use of that and allowed us to have the first $165 million upfront, and that has already been allocated based on a per pupil formula to all the schools. They're using it for the things they need to do now, which include, facilities upgrades and contracting with transportation services and professional development. There are so many things that have to be happening in real time, and so those things are underway, and we expect that we would have additional funding when school starts, because there'll be a whole new category of additional costs once that happens.
Right. I'm sure you're very anxious to have the legislature come back to be able to approve a supplemental budget that includes serious funding for education. Do you have any sense of whether that's going to happen?
I don't. That's anybody's guess. We see, there are clues one direction or the other on any given day, but I'd be hard pressed to make a guess on that. We are grateful that they did unanimously prior to going out of session in March. They did unanimously approve our school subsidy budget, which is the amount that goes to all the local schools. And we prioritize that above everything else. We worked very hard to make a really significant increase to the level of state subsidy.
I think I know the answer to this question, but do you have any authority or capacity to shift money from more prosperous districts into more financially needy districts in a emergency situation like this is?
No, we don't. We don't have that capacity. If there were, we have some contingency funding that's available for emergency situations like very high cost special education services or so forth. There is a little bit there, assuming we are, as you may have heard, we have been notified of a budget curtailment for all departments in the state. We're leaving the school subsidy alone, but we are having to look at everything else. But no, we can't do that. It's interesting. The Maine state constitution locks in certain things, which include the phenomenon of local control. Our constitution says that the several municipalities shall make suitable provision for the education. And for example, Vermont does almost what you just said. Basically, each community, the more wealthy communities and the more disadvantaged communities, they all agree to how much they're going to kick in for education. This is how much it's going to cost to educate. All that money goes to the state, and then they put it all out there. So essentially, they will be taking tax funding from the wealthier districts and making it widely available for the other. So because their constitution says the state shall make suitable provision. So it's
Having served in the legislature, I'd be amazed if Maine ever did that.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to, I don't think.
It must have been an eye-opener, and I would think it would be for anybody, but even someone of your specific experience, to find that you, of course, want to treat the school district in Millinocket the same way as you treat the school district in Cape Elizabeth, but they are so different in so many ways, not the least of which is funding, but funding is a major part of it. If there's no federal aid at all, just state money, what provisions can you make to help prop up these districts and the towns? I mean, because it's really the cities and towns that are footing the bill. Do you have any tools in your toolbox to help out where the inequities just get out of control under circumstances nobody could have predicted?
Right. Yes. There's one very cumbersome and daunting possibility, and I've been thinking about doing this prior to the COVID situation, and that would be to take another look at our school funding formula itself. The funding formula is adjusted in multiple ways. It's extraordinarily complex. It was developed by researchers who, it's very complex. The algorithm itself each year takes over a month to build, and then it has to be run for a couple of weeks. It's an unbelievably complicated and not particularly transparent methodology. So interestingly, in this emergency situation, what we have in our system is every effort toward affecting equity to the extent possible in a local control state. However, there are things baked right into it that exacerbate inequities, and that would include regional adjustments that haven't been updated in, I think, 14 years, maybe longer. I think they've, from the beginning. And those are based on individual factors like salaries and average salaries in the area. And so if you're in a more depressed area where there is more disadvantage, you would get 80 or 70 cents on the dollar, while a wealthier community who might be near other lucrative jobs and the job market is higher might get $1.15. So that in and of itself, over time, that has gone forward to really exacerbate inequity. That's one example. Another example is we have 2 or 3 parts of our formula where expenditures are reimbursed. So if you have the funding up front and you can spend a lot of money on special education services, on CTE, on transportation, or on gifted and talented programming, you get 100% of that back plus a 3% increase over time, but there are so many districts that don't have in their town treasury the upfront money to spend more, therefore they don't get the additional. So there are a whole lot of those things. And I just want to say that we recently allocated to all districts in the state this CRF, coronavirus relief funding money. And we made a formula with the assistance of several representatives from districts across the state with very different sets of circumstances. The formula that we created can be done on a spreadsheet, and everybody was very pleased with the results in terms of how equitably it came out. So I'm encouraged, let me just say, I'm encouraged that there might be something I can do to impact equity in a more meaningful way going forward. We just have to get the dust to settle at some point so that we can put our heads together on that, but yes.
Well, that's great. I appreciate the positive note because we have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, there's about 150 more questions that I could ask, but I really appreciate your taking the time. Very briefly, one or two sentences. If you could go back to 2007, 2008 and undo some of the creations of the school alignments and realignments that were done under consolidation, would you do that or would you let it go?
If I could go all the way back, that's a harder exercise. I will say this, at this point, I think those alliances and marriages of districts that are working out ought to be able to continue, and those who are finding that it is detrimental to their culture, their schools, their economics, whatever it might be, should be able to, I'm a believer in Maine's small rural communities, frankly, and including the small rural schools. And I think if given this virtual environment we can live in going forward, we have a gem of a state where people are going to want to come and live, but not in a town where there's a shut down, boarded up school on the corner.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Our guest today has been the Commissioner of Education for the state of Maine, Pender Makin, and we really appreciate your taking the time to join us. I wish we had more time. Maybe we can get you back sometime. But thank you very much for taking part in Maine Challenge, a production of Lincoln County Indivisible and Lincoln County Television. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.